Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today, well, it's to unpack the sources you sent over about the Fukuyama family. We're aiming to pull out the key insights from their incredible story. It's really a journey shaped by place and time: Alaska, internment, wartime Japan.
Exactly. We're looking at Hikohachi and Mumei, the parents, and particularly three of their children, Mary, Ethel, and Walter Jr. It's just a fascinating study in identity, American kids raised in this very unique place. And then their lives just completely fractured and also reshaped by World War II.
And that unique place is Juneau, Alaska. I mean, one of only two Japanese families there at the time. That's a very different starting point than, say, California or Washington.
Oh, absolutely. It really sets the stage differently. Hikohachi, the father, he arrived way back around 1903. He learned the local ways, and by 1929, he'd set up the Juneau Laundry on Franklin Street. He even built one of Juneau's first cement structures for it himself. That's commitment.
Yeah, it shows he wasn't just passing through, he was building something permanent. And the kids' memories from that time, they sound almost like something out of a movie. Really idyllic, very American, skiing, hunting.
Skiing with just a basic pole and string down Gold Creek.
Right. Playing, roller skating down the big hill. Apparently risking Sheriff Gale taking their skates away. Though the sources hint he maybe wasn't that strict about it.
Maybe a soft touch. And that little detail, it points to the acceptance they felt, generally speaking. Ethel mentioned their food, too. It was mostly American dishes, but maybe prepared, quote, Japanese style. Things like sushi or tofu were rare treats, special orders shipped all the way from Seattle for New Year's.
Which underscores how integrated they were in daily life. But here's something fascinating, the religious aspect. Their parents were devout Buddhists. They even had an altar at home. Yet, they sent the kids off to the Methodist Episcopal Church every Sunday, gave them a nickel for the plate. What does that tell us? That mix.
It really suggests a proactive approach to assimilation. They wanted their kids to fit in, to navigate that Juneau community easily. And Walter Jr. basically confirms this later. He said it was a real shock later in life to see large groups of Japanese people together, because his world in Juneau, maybe 3,000 people total, was just predominantly white. Ethel also said they felt very little discrimination there, at least not until the war changed everything.
And the sense of fitting in extended to the family business, the laundry. The kids definitely pitched in, but the sources are pretty clear there was a gender divide in the chores.
Yes, Mary and Ethel, the girls, they worked the mangle, did ironing, answered the phone. They had regular duties. Walter Jr., he helped out in the summers pressing shirts. One year, his payment was actually a Winchester .22 rifle.
Oh, rifle, okay. But it sounds like the girls definitely carried more of the day-to-day load at the laundry.
Yeah, seems that way. But that whole sense of stability, of community, it just evaporated on December 7th, 1941. Walter Jr. remembered hearing the news that Sunday, and his dad's best friend, who was a Navy officer, came right over to their house.
And the implication was immediate, wasn't it? The very next day, Hikohachi, the father, was arrested, jailed. This moment, it kicked off what the sources call a triple split for the family. Suddenly, they're in three completely different situations.
Exactly. The father's path was the first split, and it was harsh. He was interrogated right away. And what's really chilling is the authorities knew precisely how much money he'd sent back to family in Japan over the years, which strongly suggests, he was likely under surveillance before Pearl Harbor.
Wow, that adds another layer to it.
It does. He was labeled a prisoner of war,
Yeah.
had a jacket with a big P on the back, and then shuffled between multiple camps. Chilke Barracks, Anchorage, then down to DOJ camps in New Mexico, like Santa Fe and Lordsburg, even Montana. It was 3 years before he was finally reunited with the rest of the family in Minidoka, Idaho in 1944.
3 years separated like that. That's incredible. Okay, so that's split one. What about split two? The mother and younger kids.
Right. So Mume, Ethel, Walter Jr., and Tom. In April 1942, they were forced to leave Juneau. They had to pack what they could carry, got on a shrimp transport boat. It stopped at other Alaskan ports, picking up more Japanese residents along the coast.
And their first stop wasn't even the main camp, was it?
No, it was the pre-LF Fairgrounds in Washington State. It had been hastily converted into, a temporary assembly center. Ethel described it vividly. Sleeping on basic GI blankets, mattresses they had to stuff with hay themselves. And the barracks were so quickly built, they offered no privacy. She mentioned neighbors literally peeking through knotholes in the wall.
Knotholes. Just awful. Walter Jr., though, being a teenager, he initially saw it as, what, an adventure?
Yeah, that was his initial reaction. Strange, perhaps, but maybe a coping mechanism for a kid thrust into chaos.
Okay, so that's the second split. The third one involves Mary, the eldest daughter. And her situation was maybe the most dangerous.
Absolutely the most precarious. Mary had been sent to Japan back in 1939. She was 18. Her parents wanted someone in the family to learn Japanese properly. And, well, the sources state they also felt that expensive education like medical school wasn't necessary for girls.
Different times, different perspectives, I suppose.
Indeed. But Mary found herself completely out of place in Hiratsuka, Japan. The customs were so rigid, so different from Alaska. Even simple things like being expected to squat instead of sit on chairs felt alienating. So when Pearl Harbor happened, she immediately packed her bags, ready to leave.
That she couldn't.
No, she went to the U.S. consulate, but they told her she couldn't go. Why? Because her father, back before the war, had written a letter saying he believed there wouldn't be a war. And since Mary was still technically a minor, the consulate said she had to legally obey her father's written word, essentially. Just like that, she was trapped, an American citizen stuck in Japan for the duration of the war.
So, while most of the family was dealing with the internment system in Idaho, Mary was living through the war in Japan itself. Let's contrast those experiences. Minidoka first.
Minidoka was bleak. The sources describe it as cold, very muddy. Families relied on just a single potbelly stove for heat in their barracks. But maybe the most jarring detail, the one you shared earlier, was about the toilets. They were outside latrines, and you had to actually bang on the seat before using it.
To scare away scorpions and black widow spiders.
Exactly. Scorpions and black widows. It just elevates the idea of hardship beyond confinement. It was a daily physical risk.
Definitely puts things in perspective. And Walter Jr. being there, he experienced a kind of culture shock within his own community, right?
He did. He realized how different his Alaskan upbringing was. He found the other Nisei kids, the second-generation Japanese Americans, to be, in his words, brainy. And apparently much better at basketball, too. He took jobs inside the camp, like shoveling coal for the boilers. But here's an interesting point about agency. He also volunteered to work outside the camp.
Right, picking crops for local farmers.
Yes, potatoes, sugar beets, for Idaho farmers. And he got paid $1 an hour for that.
Which was way more than camp wages, right?
Oh, yeah. A huge difference compared to the standard $16 a month he could earn doing something like dishwashing inside the camp. So he was actively choosing better pay and maybe a bit more freedom, working outside the wire when possible. He also worked for a time as an electrician in the camp, but stopped after a friend had a bad fall. Scared him off it.
Understandable. Okay, so that's Minidoka. Meanwhile, Mary, over in Hiratsuka, Japan. Her reality sounds terrifyingly different. Existential, really.
Completely. The housing she described was primitive, mostly wood and paper. Highly flammable, especially with incendiary bombs being dropped. She said she heard the B-29 bombers flying over daily, lived under constant threat.
And she developed some survival instincts pretty fast.
Had to. She talked about when the bombing raids got really close, she'd just run for cover. She even grabbed a cooking pot and put it on her head like a makeshift helmet.
Resourceful. And there was that one specific incident?
Yes, a really telling moment. During one bombing, the crowds were panicking, running south towards where the fire seemed worst. But Mary, maybe drawing on that Alaskan self-reliance, she instinctively ran the other way, north towards an open schoolyard. And that's where she found safety. Going against the crowd saved her.
That's incredible, trusting her gut. She was also studying English at Tokyo Women's Christian College during this.
She was, which added to her feeling of being an outsider. The sources quote her saying, "We walk different, we dress different." She felt like her Americanness was just visible. And as an American citizen in wartime Japan, she often felt hostility when she spoke English. She even suspected she was being followed sometimes.
Just an immense amount of pressure.
Absolutely. And just quickly, back in Minidoka during this time, something else significant happened. Myum, the mother. Despite her and Hikohachi both coming from strong Buddhist families, Myum converted to Christianity while she was interned in Minidoka.
Right, that was a huge shift you mentioned, a seed planted for later.
A very important seed, yes. It would eventually change the whole family's spiritual direction down the line. #Tag44, post-war lives and lasting legacy.
So the war ends, the camps eventually close. What happens then? The family didn't just go back to Juneau, did they?
No, they scattered. The sources note that many older internees actually stayed in the camps for a while, simply because they had nowhere else to go, no homes left. But the younger Fukuyamas moved on quickly. Ethel and her younger brother Tom, they went to Washington, D.C., lived together in a tiny one-room apartment. Ethel started working for the federal government, and Tom finished his high school there.
And Walter Jr., he was drafted near the end of the war.
Yes, drafted in 1944. He ended up going through military language school in Minnesota, which led him to being stationed in occupied Tokyo after the war, working as an interpreter for the Military Intelligence Service, the MIS, with the 8th Army. And that's where he met his future wife, Emiko Futori. She was the oldest of 9 children.
And meeting wasn't straightforward, was it? Her family wasn't exactly welcoming at first.
Not at all. Her father, understandably perhaps, was deeply distrustful, saw all Americans as the enemy who had just bombed his country. But Walter Jr. was persistent and patient. Emiko had to travel quite far into the countryside to buy food on the black market because rationing was so severe. So Walter Jr. would just wait for her for hours at the train station to help her carry these heavy bags home.
That's dedication, a quiet kind of courtship.
Very quiet. And the sources pinpoint the moment things changed. It was Emiko who made the first move, really. During one of those walks home, she broke with Japanese custom and just reached out and grabbed his hand. A simple gesture, but huge significance.
Wow. And they got married pretty quickly after that.
Relatively quickly, yes. In 1947, it was a very simple 5-minute ceremony at the American consulate in Yokohama. Walter Jr. even managed to get some white silk from a factory he visited for work so Emiko could have a proper wedding dress made.
That's a lovely detail. But the family still weren't entirely on board.
No, both sets of parents initially struggled with the marriage. Cross-cultural, post-war. It was a lot to accept. But then came the healing moment. The birth of their first daughter, Nancy. And there's this amazing detail. She was born on July 7th, weighed 7 pounds.
And they took her home from the hospital in taxi number 7.
Yes, Walter Jr. called her their peace child. And apparently the birth of this granddaughter really did bridge the gap. It helped unite the Fukuyama and Futori families.
A true peace child. So Walter Jr. didn't stay in Japan long term.
He'd planned to, working for the army. But Emiko was lonely, missed her family, found it hard being the wife of an occupier, essentially. So they came back to the U.S., to Seattle. And this is where you see how adversity, combined with opportunity, shaped his path. Internment obviously disrupted everything, but the post-war GI Bill. That was a key.
Right, the program offering benefits to veterans.
Exactly. He used it to get an economics degree from the University of Washington. And then while working full-time, he went back to school at night to get a mechanical engineering degree from Seattle University.
That's some serious determination.
Incredible drive. And it led to a 33-year career at Boeing. He retired as a principal engineer, worked on major projects, even the Lunar Orbiter program.
From internment camp barracks to designing parts for missions to the moon, that's quite a trajectory.
It really is. And remember that spiritual seed you made planted back in Minidoka. It fully blossomed in Walter Jr.'s life. He felt strongly that putting God first was behind his unexpected career success. He and Emiko later spent years serving as missionaries back in Kobe, Japan. And eventually his faith journey led the entire Fukuyama family, even his father Hikohachi, who had been very resistant initially, to embrace Christianity. Hashtag take Eve email.
Outro.
It's just such a story of adaptation, isn't it? You start with this family running a laundry in Juneau, Alaska, and you end up with siblings who are experts in Civil War history, working high up in the federal government, designing satellites. The sources just paint this incredibly stark contrast between the quiet life they might have planned and the extraordinary lives history forced upon them. Absolutely. The resilience is the key theme. You see it in Mary figuring out how to survive bombing raids in Japan by reading the wind and running the right way. You see it in Walter Jr. making a mattress out of hay in a fairground stall, and decades later, engineering parts for space exploration. Their identities as Nisei, as Japanese Americans, were really shattered and tested by these huge geopolitical forces, but they were ultimately reformed into something much broader, more complex, more globally aware, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely more complex. And that brings us to a final thought, actually something Walter Jr. himself reflected on. He apparently once said that if the war hadn't happened, he probably would have just stayed in Juneau, maybe become a car mechanic. So considering the remarkable, unexpected paths he and his siblings actually took, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What major life trajectories are being altered right now for people all around you, maybe even for you, by big events unfolding today, things seemingly outside our personal control? What kind of destinies are being carved out by the history we're living through right now? Something to think about after this deep dive.